Steve has it all: a beautiful new girlfriend and a successful career as a real estate agent that allows him to travel first class on a luxury vacation. But Steve can't turn off the real estate side of himself and keeps an eye out for new clients or companions to help make his next big deal. The cruise ship pulls away from Miami on a 4-day journey to the Bahamas. Steve is in the mood for fun as he and his girlfriend wave goodbye to the people on shore, leaving all their worries behind. But unbeknownst to Steve, he's being watched by someone who's very interested in what he's doing. Later that evening, the two men have an alcohol-fueled confrontation at the poker tables, and they have to be separated by a security guard. While this is going on, a storm brews up, with others heeding the captain's orders and taking refuge inside the boat during the storm. Steve's luck is about to run out. Steve is a handsome, charming real estate agent showing a client a house before it hits the market. He takes pride in his looks, thinking that if he can sell himself, he can sell the house.
Steve became this great real estate agent. He even sold me a house. I always recommended Steve to everyone. You could see Steve's billboards all over the city. Even stopped at a red light, and there would be Steve's face right there.
Never missing a chance to sweeten the deal, Steve gives some of his female clients a more individual approach when the opportunity presents itself.
He's very social, very outgoing. Altogether, people would say he's a very gregarious, very happy person.
He's one of the top agents in the city, but working at such a high level has him stressed out and in need of a vacation. This is the first trip together for Steve and his new girlfriend, Laura.
She was much younger. I mean, she seemed all right.
He books a 4-day cruise to get to know her better and see if she's worth more of his time. He prefers trips like this to the usual dinner and movies that most people go on, and it's no problem spending the extra money. At the same time, another passenger catches Steve's eye, Ashley, who notices him back. He continues to cast glances at her, while his own girlfriend isn't looking.
Steve's an interesting character. He's very much a ladies' man, very charismatic, loves to get along with people, very personable, always looking for a way to close the deal. But even though he might be charming, he's also the classic narcissist. If you can't do something for him, he really has no interest in you. So when you're the focus of his attention, it may feel wonderful, like you're the only person in the world. But when his focus slips to someone else, it's devastating.
However, Steve isn't being as subtle with his flirting as he'd like to believe. Another passenger is watching it all go down. With the long, exciting day ahead, Steve and Laura go back to their room and start planning the fun that they're going to have. But Steve's mind is working overtime, designing plans for not only himself and Laura, but also figuring out when he can meet up with this new woman. The abundance of activities on board gives Steve a great idea. Laura goes to the spa for a massage while he has a nap, or so he says. Laura would rather get a couples massage with Steve, but she defers to him and gets ready. Waiting the appropriate amount of time after Laura leaves, Steve springs out of bed and leaves the room to go find the woman from the deck. Once he finds her, it doesn't take long for Steve and Ashley to pick up where they left off with flirting. Watching all of this with interest is Vance. He keeps his distance, but is very interested in what these two are doing. After Steve and Ashley go back inside, Vance follows, careful not to get too close.
One of the things that a lot of people enjoy doing when they embark on a cruise is just to people watch. And you're in a very confined environment with a lot of people. There's certainly lots to see and lots of people to observe.
However, just as you're watching them, you never know who's lurking around the corner watching you.
The massage ended more than an hour ago, and Laura's waiting on Steve and getting worried. Claiming he couldn't sleep, Steve tells Laura that he needed some fresh air. He's relieved that she buys the story, and they make plans to go out to dinner. On her way to dinner, Ashley is stopped in her tracks when she sees her ex-boyfriend, Vance, walking toward her. This is not a happy reunion. Ashley had kicked Vance out of her house after catching him cheating on her. Vance pretends to be offended at Ashley's frosty reception. He tells her it's a coincidence she's on the boat too, and he just wants to relax. Ashley asks him to leave her alone. Vance tells Ashley that she needs to stop seeing Steve immediately, or there will be consequences to their actions. Steve orders dinner for himself and Laura without giving her a chance to order for herself. After a long first day, Steve says goodnight to Laura before heading to the casino. Laura offers to go with him, but he's got some energy to burn and tells her to stay in bed.
Just like Steve enjoys gambling, he also enjoys playing with people's hearts, and this is common for a lot of cheaters. It's partially the thrill of getting caught, or rather not getting caught, that keeps them interested.
Playing a few hands of poker to unwind, Vance is on a winning streak, but that streak is threatened when a new player joins. As soon as she gets to the table, Ashley begs Steve to leave with her, but he tells her he'd like to play a few games first. Despite her insistence on leaving the casino, Steve tells Ashley to wait. Vance casually mentions to Steve that he used to date Ashley, and she's using him only to make him jealous. Ashley tells Vance to stop following her, but he resents being told what to do. Having seen this type of late-night behavior before, the dealer waves over a security guard because she knows this won't end well.
When you're stuck in close quarters like you are on a cruise ship, it can breed more conflict than may normally be there. In this case, when you have two very strong personalities clashing, and they're clashing over a woman, it can get very volatile very quickly.
The security guard separates the two, and escorts Vance out of the casino.
Unfortunately for poor Laura, she stumbles upon Steve kissing another woman, kissing Ashley, and she was able to get out of there before he saw her, but clearly this devastated her. She's on this cruise with a guy she really had feelings for, was hoping their relationship would lead to something serious, and now she's found him with another woman.
Having had enough drinks and drama for the night, but not ready to go back to his room, Steve heads outside on the deck for some fresh air. Just before Steve heads out on the deck, a storm arrives. Soon after going outside, a crew member notices Steve and tells him the captain has ordered all guests inside the ship because of the severe weather. Steve assures him he's just getting some fresh air and will be inside in moments.
In particularly bad weather, the captain may order passengers to stay indoors. Decks can become overly dangerous, they can become slippery. The boat is moving in such a fashion that most passengers wouldn't be used to. They wouldn't have those type of sea legs. So staying indoors where it's safest would be something that the crew would order. It would be similar to the captain of a plane switching on the seatbelt sign, yes, if there's turbulence.
While Steve looks out at the turbulent sea, a figure steps out of the shadows behind him. Turning to see who's there, Steve tells them to leave him alone. He feels he's being cornered and tries to steady himself to shove the other person away. New couple Laura and Steve are watching from the deck of a luxury cruise ship that will take them from Miami to the Bahamas. Another passenger on board, Ashley, catches Steve's eye and starts to flirt with him from afar while Laura isn't looking. Though his girlfriend doesn't notice Steve's wandering eye, another passenger, Vance, does. A fight is poised to break out because the woman Steve is flirting with is Vance's ex-girlfriend. A security guard separates the two men and sends them in opposite directions. A storm is raging, and all passengers and crew are ordered inside for their own safety. Steve ignores the order and is joined by an unexpected guest. The storm and the argument are reaching a fevered pitch. The next morning, a crew member stumbles upon Steve's lifeless body. The crew member checks to see if Steve is alive, but finds no signs of life.
Steve is found dead from blunt force trauma to the head. What happened to him?
A blood-gushing head injury is extremely serious. No matter how the injury occurs, massive blood loss without immediate medical attention leaves little hope for survival.
The person in charge on a cruise ship is obviously the captain. They need to be aware of everything going on, and they're the ones that ultimately have decision-making power over what happens on the ship. So anytime something serious happens, the captain needs to be alerted.
The captain arrives and takes charge of the scene. His first order of business is to secure the area to make sure that no passengers are around to witness the dead body. The crew member that found Steve's body tells the captain how he discovered it and that he remembers him from last night. At precisely the wrong time, Laura, who has been looking for Steve all morning, walks out and sees Steve's dead body. The captain orders a crew member to take her back to her room and wait for him. The dealer tells the captain that Steve was in the casino last night with a woman and had an argument with another guest. Knowing he has to act fast, the captain tells another crew member they have to identify the body and the person Steve was arguing with last night as fast as they can. They will push on to the next port and meet with authorities there.
When a body is found in this manner, the investigation essentially needs to begin immediately because time is essentially running out already. It needs to be determined how long this body has been there, how it got there, what happened to it, who may have seen how it got there. This is where the evidence starts to disappear, so the investigation needs to start right away.
The captain calls Laura, hoping she has details to notify the victim's next of kin and can clarify her relationship with Steve.
Notifying next of kin is one of the more difficult things one can do in law enforcement. There's no single way to do it other than to be respectful of the person who you're giving the news to, but at the same time you need to be direct and give them the information that they need to have. You can't beat around the bush with it.
Attempting to comfort her, the captain asks if there's anything she needs or anyone they can call, but Laura doesn't answer. Fearing for her mental health, the captain asks her to stay in the room and avoid seeing the body again or talking to anyone else. When there's a death on board a cruise ship, the body is placed in a medical cooler until it can be safely transported to a land-based facility. The ship's authorities, looking for some clue into what happened to Steve, checked the surveillance footage from the deck he was discovered on. Investigators have 3 suspects. Was it Steve's girlfriend, Laura, who saw him kissing another woman in the casino? Could it be Ashley, the woman who Steve was kissing? Or was it Ashley's obsessive ex-boyfriend, Vance, who instigated a confrontation between the 2 men earlier that evening? New couple Steve and Laura are pushing off on a luxury cruise ship. Later in the day, Steve meets up with another woman named Ashley. They agree to rendezvous later that night in the casino, but they don't notice Ashley's stalker ex-boyfriend is watching them. After a confrontation between the 2 men in the casino, Steve heads out on deck for some air, where he gets into an argument with an unknown person. The following morning, a crew member finds Steve's lifeless body in a pool of his own blood. Laura is devastated and has to be escorted away. Despite the cruise ship being gone for less than a day, the captain orders it to continue to the next port, where they will be met by local authorities. Until then, he wants to find out what happened by questioning those who might have wanted Steve killed. A blow to the head can cause internal bleeding, which spreads fast and doesn't give a person any time to recover or get help themselves. The dealer tells the captain there was another woman there with Steve, and she's the reason they were fighting. Ashley tells Vance that she's fed up with him and warns him to leave her alone or she'll call security. Vance tells her to stop seeing Steve and to come with him. Knowing how important her account of the situation is to the investigation, the captain orders a crew member to find Ashley. Though he has no power to arrest a passenger and can detain someone until the authorities take over. The captain doesn't know if the security footage will ever be able to identify Steve's killer. He informally interviews 3 suspects, Vance, Laura, and Ashley, ahead of reaching the next port and having local police take over. The first person the captain interviews is Vance. He asks Vance right away about what happened in the casino. The story, as Vance tells it, is that Ashley purposely flirts with Steve to make him jealous. He admits that he got angry seeing the 2 of them together, but he was being provoked. He saw Ashley parading this guy all over the ship and wanted it to stop. Then, Steve wanted to fight. But things cooled off, according to Vance, when a security guard showed up to separate them. Vance knew that was the end of it right there when he was escorted out of the casino. Telling the captain that he was only standing up for himself, Vance believes he was doing the right thing. The captain doesn't buy Vance's story and decides to push Vance to see how he reacts. The captain asks point blank why he wanted to kill Steve. Vance tells him he didn't kill him or even want to, and that he's not saying another word. Vance's calm reply catches the captain off guard. He wonders if Vance is really capable of murder.
The notion of interviewing suspects separately allows investigators to gain subtle differences in their stories. You hear slightly different information from each person, and depending on what each person says, it can point you in the direction of who may be responsible for the particular crime. There's no case where suspects should be ever interviewed together. There's no way that they should be given the opportunity to confirm things with each other in order to keep their stories straight. The only story that's important is the truth.
The captain questions Ashley about meeting Steve and why she would pursue a fleeting relationship. Ashley tells him she was just looking to have fun, that's all.
Lust is considered to be one of the 7 deadly sins for a reason. It can lead us to do things we shouldn't do.
Knowing that Vance is her ex-boyfriend, the captain asks why he would be on this boat at the same time she was. Ashley confesses that Vance cheated on her, and after she broke up with him, he followed her to keep tabs on her wherever she went. She believes Vance hacked into her phone to read her emails so he could read her messages and follow her movements. The captain wonders if Ashley was using Steve to get under Vance's skin and provoke a reaction. But Ashley claims she just thought Steve was cute and didn't know he had a girlfriend. As for the woman that Steve was with, Ashley thought it was his sister or daughter. He never actually told her who she was, and she didn't care enough to ask. The captain questions Ashley about what happened in the casino to see if her account matches up with the dealer's. She says it was Vance that was the aggressor, and they were just defending themselves.
Ashley recognizes Vance right away and is very disturbed by this because this is her ex-boyfriend and they've had a very volatile relationship. He's been stalking her, and she knows he's only on the cruise ship because she's there. So she's obviously very upset to see him there.
The captain suspects that Ashley was using Steve as a pawn, but was she just a stalker's victim who came up with a desperate plan to use Steve and provoke Vance into creating a scene in front of dozens of witnesses?
Steve was a friendly guy. You know, some might say a little too friendly, but no. He was just an all right good guy. If there was a problem, Steve would want to work it out. That's the type of guy he was.
A bit of a triangle's created when Vance won't listen to reason and he won't leave Ashley alone. Then Steve feels he needs to step up, and this gets security involved.
Did her simple plan just spiral out of control? Or was she a ruthless manipulator who maneuvered Vance into committing murder so she could finally be rid of him? Did she murder Steve, leaving the innocent Vance to take the fall? Ashley simply claims that Vance had been stalking her and made sure that he would be in the casino when she arrived. As the ship gets closer to its next port of call, the captain begins to question Laura. He asks Laura if she knew Steve was seeing Ashley. She had a feeling he was up to something, but didn't know what. Then she caught him red-handed. When she couldn't sleep, Laura went to find Steve in the casino. but wasn't ready for what she saw. Seeing her boyfriend kiss another woman stuns Laura. Feeling betrayed, she runs out of the casino, crying. Was Laura driven to murder after Steve's constant flirting and then catching him kissing Ashley? He implies she would have the best motive to kill Steve over anyone else. He then proposes that she wanted to teach Steve a lesson and got carried away. She admits she was upset, but didn't want to kill him and only went back to her room. Laura's interrogation ends. A crewman informs the captain that they'll be docking soon, and authorities are anxious to speak to the suspects. Steve Griffin is taking his girlfriend on a cruise. Another passenger on board, Ashley, catches Steve's eye, and he flirts with her. Later that night, the two men end up sitting at the same poker table. Vance provokes an altercation, and a security guard has to separate them. As a storm rolls in, Steve wants to be alone, but is ready to fight. The next morning, a crew member discovers Steve's dead body. The surveillance video is inconclusive due to the storm and water on the camera, blurring the footage. Perhaps enhancing the video can reveal what truly took place on deck. The captain informally interviews 3 passengers identified as possible suspects in Steve's murder. Vance, who he got into a fight with in the casino, Ashley, the woman Steve met with on the boat that he was cheating with, and Laura, Steve's girlfriend that came with him on the trip. Once the ship has docked at the next port, the 3 suspects are brought into the police station for formal questioning from Detective Arbogast. Arbogast zeroes in on Laura's relationship with Steve and asks when and where they met. Laura tells her he almost sold her a house. According to Laura, Steve starts every relationship with a hug because he thinks you can always tell the type of person you're dealing with by how they hug.
It's true that Steve was a hugger. I mean, how many people do that these days? Oh yeah, and it was part of his real estate brand. Get a house and get a hug.
Some might call Steve a little bit over-affectionate. He tends to hug every woman he meets right off the hop, right when he first meets them. And some women find this a bit creepy or a bit disturbed by this. But if anyone has a problem with it, he can always just say it's his way of doing business.
Aware that Steve was a bit of a womanizer, Arbogast wonders if Laura had ever caught Steve with another woman, or if she ever suspected his cheating. Laura admits that Steve's flirting with other women had bothered her, but didn't suspect he was cheating on her.
He had more female friends than male friends. I mean, how many guys can do that? He just trusted women.
Because Steve was her first real, serious boyfriend, Laura didn't have anything to compare his behavior to.
When someone's willing to check out other women, obviously check them out when he's with his girlfriend, that's a big red flag. And this was something Steve did quite a bit. However, he always had excuses ready. Either he could say, oh, I think that was a client, or I think that was a colleague, I think that was another agent. It was like he had a Rolodex of mental excuses that he could use whenever he got called out.
Thinking she must have been angry right before Steve was killed, Arbogast asked Laura how she felt when she saw Steve hugging Ashley in the casino. Because she couldn't sleep, Laura went down to see Steve in the casino to entice him back to the room, but wasn't prepared for what she saw.
Female intuition is very strong. We can tell if a hug is just a hug or if there's something more to it. Laura clearly saw something more to the hug and kiss that her boyfriend gave Ashley.
Was Laura driven to murder after Steve's constant flirting and then catching him kissing Ashley? She admits she was upset, but didn't want to kill him and only went back to her room.
Infidelity is often one of the primary motivating factors in violent crime in intimate relationships. So the notion that she has seen him possibly cheating on her would put her into such a rage that she would act out violently.
Detective Arbogast knows about Ashley and Vance's earlier relationship and bitter breakup, and her claims of Vance stalking her. Was Ashley using Steve to get back at Vance?
Well, I think they had different perspectives as to what the relationship was. I think he, in looking at her, saw somebody he was interested in, whereas when she was looking at him, she saw an opportunity to get away from somebody she was trying to be protected from. Their perspectives as to what this relationship was likely very different.
In this case, Steve was actually kind of used. Ashley wanted to throw Vance off, make him see that she was with someone else, and maybe finally get the hint that she was over him. So she played up to Steve for that reason, not because she was necessarily that interested in him.
Arbogast wonders why Ashley and Steve stayed in the casino after she saw that Vance was there. Ashley replies that she tried getting Steve out of there, but he won't budge because he wants to win some money.
So Vance had a particular affinity for Ashley. So when he saw Ashley looking at Steve in a flirtatious way, he took that very personally. And I assume he became very jealous. But that in and of itself doesn't mean that he committed a crime like murder.
Steve was always aware of his public image. I can't see Steve getting into a confrontation. Who would want to see a real estate agent with a black eye?
Vance is getting exactly the reaction he wanted from Ashley and Steve, but then a security guard arrives to break them up. After leaving the casino, Ashley claims she went back to her room and was going to meet up with Steve the next day. Arbogast begins Vance's interview by asking him why he was stalking his ex-girlfriend Ashley. Vance denies this and says he was simply on vacation. It's just a coincidence. Arbogast isn't buying that Vance booked this trip by chance. She believes he knew Ashley's schedule and was going to be there no matter what. From the moment he gets on the boat, Vance sees the flirting and it angers him. He's sure Ashley knew he was there and was trying to hurt him. For a moment, Arbogast gives Vance the benefit of the doubt and agrees that it's not nice to have your ex taunt you. But then, Arbogast questions why Vance didn't just move to another part of the boat. Claiming to almost always take the high road, Vance says he was not going to let his ex dictate how he was going to spend his vacation. He explains that he wanted to relax by playing some poker, but then Ashley and her new boyfriend showed up and ruined his night. Doing his best to stay calm, Vance barely acknowledges Steve sitting down beside him at the table. The best thing Vance could do in a situation like this is not give in to his anger. But jealousy and alcohol don't mix. The dealer sees where this is going and calls over a security guard to separate them before it gets violent. Knowing the answer before she asks, Arbogast asks Vance where he went after leaving the casino. At first, Vance says that he just went for a walk, but Arbogast tells him security footage shows that he circled back and trailed Steve. Admitting that he did follow Steve outside, Vance says it was only because he wanted to apologize.
We don't know what Vance's motivations were for following Steve outside. There was an opportunity to be alone with Steve because he knew that the deck would be relatively empty of people because they were ordered to stay inside.
Unfortunately for Vance, he ends up being the last person to see Steve alive. He followed Steve back from the casino, and instead of going to their cabins like they were ordered to do, they ended up having an altercation on deck. This makes Vance the prime suspect.
Real estate agent Steve Griffin's body is found the morning after the first night of his cruise. There are 3 possible suspects, and they're interrogated by a police detective. Ashley, a woman that Steve had been flirting with, her jealous ex-boyfriend Vance, who had confronted them in the casino the night before, and Steve's girlfriend Laura, who had caught him kissing Ashley after Vance had been escorted from the casino. Surveillance video shows some sort of altercation, but investigators are awaiting enhancement of the footage. They zero in on Vance as the prime suspect. Vance is charged for the murder of Steve, the real estate agent, while on board the cruise ship. He maintains his innocence and says he's not violent, but the prosecution charges that Vance was on a course for violence before he even got on the boat. Ashley had kicked Vance out of her house after catching him cheating on her. But as Vance leaves, he takes out his frustration. The prosecution continues that Vance hacked into Ashley's email and found out when she was going on a cruise and booked a ticket on the same trip to keep tabs on her. After seeing Ashley flirt with Steve, Vance is more determined than ever to make sure no one else could be with her. This is extremely disturbing behavior from an ex who can't accept the fact that a relationship is dead. By hacking into Ashley's phone and reading her emails, Vance knows where she'll be at any time, ensuring that he'll run into her. The final straw comes when Steve joins Vance at the poker table. The prosecution argues that Vance was waiting for Steve and Ashley to meet in the casino and confront them. When Ashley arrives and sees her ex-boyfriend Vance, she immediately wants Steve to leave with her. But Steve is a gambler and wants to stay. The situation escalates just like Vance wants it to, and Steve challenges him to a fight.
One of the nicest things about Steve is that he always stood up to bullies, no matter who they were.
The dealer is watching all of this go down and calls over a security guard to separate them before it turns violent.
As a result of an altercation that took place in the casino between Vance and Steve, Vance was asked to leave the casino. But instead of just leaving and walking away, it was seen that he waited outside for Steve to leave in sort of a predatory fashion. So that would lead an investigator to suspect that maybe Vance had something to do with Steve's death. It's also at around this time that the captain announces that passengers must turn indoors and stay off the decks. So Vance may take this as an opportunity to be alone with Steve, where he can continue his confrontation with him.
The storm actually helps Vance confront Steve because he knows no one's going to bother them. Everyone else has been ordered inside their cabins, and unlike Steve and Vance, they've followed those instructions. It's a great chance to get Steve alone and have it out.
Moments after Steve goes out on deck, Vance confronts him, and the two continue what they started in the casino. The prosecution claims this footage proves that Vance was with Steve and fighting with him moments before he died and should be found guilty of murder.
It's just not right that Steve is gone. I can't believe he's gone. I just can't.
Next, the defense tells the jury they can't dispute most of what the prosecution alleges happened. In fact, they say that most of it occurred exactly how they say it did. The fate of Vance rests in the hands of the jury as they will be giving their verdict today. The prosecution's case is strong, almost rock solid, with the defense agreeing to almost everything that happened on the deck. Everything except one point. The footage from the cruise ship deck shows Vance is preparing to fight back against Steve when Mother Nature intervenes. Steve slips when the boat shifts due to the strong waves and hits his head on the steel railing, and again when he hits the ground, opening up a fatal gash in his head. Vance never touched him.
In the end, the evidence shows that the storm ultimately contributed to Steve's death. He fell as a result of the wet deck and the movement of the ship and hit his head, injuring himself so severely that he essentially bled to death in a very short period of time. Vance saw this happen. He was there when it happened. And basically, he did nothing to assist Steve. He didn't alert anybody to the fact that this had happened. He just left Steve there to die. This speaks more to Vance's character than it does to whether or not he committed a crime. In fact, what he did wasn't determined to be criminal.
Investigators have screened all of the security footage and they found out that Vance was telling the truth. He was the last person to see Steve alive, but he didn't kill him. The bad weather caused the ship to move in a way that Steve didn't expect, and he fell and hit his head. Instead of helping him or getting help for him, Vance just left him lying there, but he didn't kill him.
In certain jurisdictions, he may find himself in criminal hot water, so to speak. In this particular case, he wasn't found liable or criminally responsible for not reporting anything.
Vance is cleared of all charges in Steve's death and is released from custody. The jury finds Steve at fault for not heeding the captain's orders to stay inside during the storm. It's the disregard for those orders and not Vance that ultimately killed Steve.